This week, the New Mexico Human Services Department announced 2 behavioral health providers would repay a total of $4.2 million in alleged Medicaid overbillings. They are among 15 organizations, as you know, serving those with mental illness and addictions that state officials claim overbilled by $36 million and some change. Now, Human Services alleges, an audit found evidence of mismanagement and possible fraud in that $36 million. There was an ongoing investigation by the Attorney General, who's refused to release key parts of the audit despite lawsuits by media outlets and a government watchdog group. Meanwhile, a legislative panel heard testimony this week from one father who says his autistic sons are not getting the needed mental health services, and officials with a Valencia County facility say layoffs mean clients are not getting help. Joining us to talk about this and other news of the week is one of our line regulars, newly minted attorney Sophie Martin, fresh from the courtroom. And our other line regular here today is Dan Foley, former Republican whip in the State House. Returning this week in this dream team table, Whitney Waite of the Waite Company, another regular. I miss you, Laura Sanchez is back, CEO of the Green Chamber of Commerce. Now, Sophie, many questions about these repayments, and our colleague Trip Jennings did some great work about this and posited a couple of interesting questions. We don't know the details of these agreements. Now, settlements can come in many various forms for many various reasons. We have quotes from the group saying, in essence, we don't admit wrongdoing, but this is the most prudent way to go. Why do folks decide to do it that way?
It's true, and I think it's really important to note that often parties in a lawsuit will say, we're going to make a payment just to end this. That's a normal settlement practice,
right.
And it's not an admission of guilt. It's basically a realistic statement that this may cost us more in the long run to go forward than what we're going to pay out now just to stop the bleeding.
Right.
And so, that's what the agencies are saying to us now. They're saying, listen, we just need to put an end to this so that we can resume business. What the state is saying is, listen, there are still probes happening, there's still all this other stuff going on. So we have these two messages going out, and we're also hearing that it's going to take quite some time for the rest of it to shake out. Now, public sentiment seems to be on the side of the agency still, and so they may have really made a good choice here in saying,
who would be the they?
Pardon me, Presbyterian and YDI, the two health services groups. They may have made a good choice in saying, we're going to get back to business, we're going to get back to work serving New Mexicans, and see if this doesn't fade for them.
Sure. Whitney, one of the interesting things about it, Sophie mentions Presbyterian Medical Services. Let me read you their quote. While we have never agreed with the state's contentions, allegations, or actions, PMS's primary motivation in settling was to preserve its critical safety net behavioral health services and over 200 jobs. Fair enough. Does the administration, however, have an interesting case here? Not quite I told you so, but $4.2 million is not an insignificant sum. And we don't know what the deal is here, meaning, was it fraud? Was it a clerical error? We still have not got those details. However, let's stay on the $4.2 million. What does that mean in the public sentiment that Sophie just mentioned?
$4.2 million. Now, if you look at the look back time on the audit, it was like somewhere between 3 and 6 years. So $4 million on an $84 million a year budget amounts to less than 1% of the overall budget. Okay. So what you're saying to Presbyterian is, you're saying, okay, you're not allowed to have less than 1% error in your books at $84 million. The context of this is very, very small, and nobody's really been talking about it. Yeah, the number sounds big, but in the context of what Presbyterian Medical Services does, Health Services does, it's almost nothing. I mean, you can't go to any large organization and expect them to have 100% error-free bookkeeping. So that's the first thing to remember. The second thing is that a lot of the problems that Presbyterian reportedly had were actually with some of the providers that they partnered with. So I think it was a lot of good faith effort on Presbyterian's part to look at some of those partnerships and figure out, what they had to stay with or what they didn't, which, the administration liked that they were able to do that. I guess that's what I would say, is just keep it in context in terms of the overall amount. Another thing that's really important to remember is not even Presbyterian has seen these audits. So they basically made a settlement and not knowing how much they were actually going to be shown to have been out of audit. So they actually may get money back. That's even a possibility. Nobody knows that. So
interesting about that, Laura, what Whitney just mentioned, because how the rebate or refunds works, it's not as if Presbyterians writing a check that the taxpayer is going to see
Right.
for any appreciable reason. It's really just withholding
Right.
other Medicaid monies. It's very interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the way
Yeah.
that they're paying back. They've made an agreement basically to withhold a future payment on Medicaid from the feds that would go through the state. But basically, it's not going to come out of their, they're not writing a check. That's for Presbyterian. For YDI, they are actually writing a check for, I think, something like $242,000. And I would probably guess that that's a big part of their overall operational budget. It's a fairly small
Sure.
organization.
And they use the word prudent in their release as well.
Right.
Interesting that they see that word again. Yeah,
Right,
YDI.
and I think that Whitney raises a good point. I mean, without having, and I think this is why a lot of the public is very skeptical all the way around about this, not just this deal, but the overall mess.
Sure.
That we just don't know what's in the audits. They haven't been made public. There has been a lot of information out there. There's still this ongoing investigation by the Attorney General's office. So absent some answers along those lines, you really don't know where to point the blame.
Is this a case where if it turns out in the details of it, it is somewhat clerical, somewhat this, somewhat that, maybe a bad employee in the past, who knows? Is it important to have those details once a settlement is agreement for reputation's sake? Does it matter?
Well, I think, certainly legally, once a settlement is reached, there's usually some kind of an agreement that details like that won't be released.
Gotcha.
I mean, typically when you have a settlement for an issue of any sort, the parties come together and in exchange for some sort of a payment, there's an admission of, or no admission of guilt, and then there's some kind of a non-disclosure agreement. So I would expect that in any of these cases, if there is a settlement, then there will be some kind of a gag order on any kind of details being disclosed. But I think that's separate from what's actually moving forward at the Attorney General's office, and that sounds like it could still
Right.
lead to some kind of charges of fraud.
See that, and I appreciate you saying that too, Dan, because that's the settlement thing is not quite. It makes one think, okay, there was not enough there to prosecute something. But that may not necessarily be the case because of what Laura's saying. That's a different purview of a different agency.
I think there's a couple things here. First of all, is I don't agree with Laura. I don't think the public is clamoring for all this information. I think the public perception is that it's working. I think there's media folks that want this information, but I think overwhelmingly the public's like, leave it alone and let them do it, because you're not seeing it rise at any level of polls. You're not seeing it come out there. You're not seeing it in letters to editors. I mean, it's really not rising to the level that you see other things. So I think
At this point, previously,
well,
I could say it had.
it really even then it was, and
warmer,
it was very pointed. Letters were from providers that were not getting the money, and it seems like it was very, they weren't getting the money. People wrote some letters. Now they're getting the money. So that's one issue. The other issue that's I think is even more important is I think if you read even Matt Kennicott's comments is that they're
He's a spokesperson
for
Human
HSD
Services.
that they kind of say they don't think these guys were committing fraud.
Right.
They say these guys, there were some errors and they need to fix it. They're not part of the 15 others that he
Right.
mentions that are moved on to the Attorney General and they're trying to get the things
Right.
done that they can. So I think there needs to be a separation from, I think that this is the result of audit findings, not necessarily the result of the criminal investigation that's still going on. That's good news and bad news. The good news is that, yes, the administration is going to claim victory. Hey, we got back, 4.4 million or so, but it's not really from the prosecution of what people are perceiving as the fraud. I think this was just the normal, we're doing the audit, we found some mistakes, you got to pay back based on these rules, or however it is, and I think that's what's happening. And I think that's why you're seeing the comments from the folks that they're paying, that they're saying, whoa, we're not admitting anything, because everybody out there right now thinks if you're paying $1 back, you're in this fraud deal.
But let me ask Laura on that point. Is this not a question of using a sledgehammer to kill a fly? Because if in fact, YDI, for example, if it was $240, let's assume it was a billing error or something that just could be cleaned up with a check, did they have to go through all this and all these funds withheld? And there are consequences to that, to what happened to these people, beyond just the check being written. How does one account for that? Did it have to go down like that?
I think we could speculate on both sides on whether it had to go down that way. But I think ultimately, both of these companies, both of these organizations have made a decision to move past this and without admitting any guilt, but just get back on the right track for them. And I think it's a very it's an important decision that an organization has to make, a company has to make, without admitting
a
any kind of
nonprofit.
right, especially a nonprofit,
point.
because there's also a lot of value in settling something just to be able to keep your reputation intact, just to be able to move forward quickly.
That's right.
And once things become public in a trial, even if it's a civil trial or a criminal trial, it's public. A lot of that gets, your dirty laundry gets aired, and it becomes a real problem to roll some of that stuff back. You can't unring that bell. In other
But I
words.
think the state and these two entities have gone to great lengths to basically say, you're not fraud people. You're
That's
you're
right.
folks that made mistakes.
That's right.
But you're not in this fraud investigation of 15 others that's still hanging
I think
out
there's going to be
there.
a call for that. I really do, to parse this out a little bit, to start making some categories over who's a criminal, who's, mistake prone. There's a difference in
I think
these
the
things.
call
so,
has been
yeah.
going out for some time, and I think that's part of the challenge is
Right.
that distinction has not been made.
That's right.
And that's part of the heartache over this.
Exactly right. In a moment, I sit down with APS Superintendent Winston Brooks to talk about the Great City Schools Conference and the ongoing controversy over new teacher evaluations.